Hello, everybody. It is Cody Engdahl, and I am live here with you today. It's Saturday. I think it's the 15th. Before we get started, I'd like to say please subscribe and hit the like button and share it if you'd like to share it. And also give me a comment. There it is. I have. Okay, just as I go live, I get a text message. So hang on a second. Sorry. Okay, that is from Paul, and I'll get back to him. Let me just say no problem. All right. That always happens. I go live and then people start, no one pays me any attention at all. And then as soon as I go live, I start getting phone calls and I start getting text messages. So anyway, welcome to my channel. The whole idea behind this channel is, if you don't know me already, I am a historical novelist. And this channel here is really funny. It's been around the world. It started off as like me playing guitar and fixing up a Telecaster, to like a dumping ground of like every time I was on Channel 4, like I was a reporter, so I was putting things there like a demo reel. And I've done a lot of different things. And then my bands, I'm a fiddle player, which we're going to get into that today and why I'm dressed this way. And then also, what I'm doing now is I have settled into writing, which is what I was supposed to do all my life. And I've written 4 novels, and I'm writing my 5th one now. And I wanted to use this channel. I mean, really, everything, just so you know, if you're a friend of mine and you're following me on social media, everything I do is to market myself as an author in my books, because I'm writing books for the rest of my life. And I got 4 I'm very proud of. The first 3 are a trilogy that takes place in the American Civil War. It's one of the reasons why I'm dressed this way. And then the 4th one is a prequel that it's about the main character's parents and how they meet each other, fall in love, run away, and end up in the Mexican-American War. So, and now I'm writing my 5th one, which is it takes place after the American Civil War, and it's and we'll get into that a little bit, but I'll just tell you this now: it takes place in the Austro-Prussian War. If you read my trilogy and the prequel, it's about Karl after the war, and he goes to Germany to be reunited with his wife. And here we go. Hang on a second. Hang on a second. I'm so sorry. I'm getting all like my attention now that I'm live. Thanks. This is for my friend Paul. The photos from the cemetery program looked good, which is what we're going to talk about. Did Abe buy a book, which is Abe Lincoln things? I'm just right. Thanks. Not this time. All right. I'm keeping up with people is very important to me. So if someone sends me an email or a text message, I try to make sure I get back to it right away, because I'm likely to forget. So why am I dressed like this? Well, because I am a full-grown man-child. It is true. One of the reasons why, first of all, I'm not only an author of historical novels, I am a fan. I'm a fan first, and I am a fan of a lot of people who I now am able to call my own friends. I was very excited because I was at a function today, and I posted it, and one of the authors that I am a fan of is friends with me on social media. Angus Donald, who wrote a great series on what's his name? Robin Hood, and he's got a great one that takes place during. It's a series. I read the book that is about it's after the English Civil War, with the wars in Ireland, but he shared. And this guy's a big deal. Like, I got his book out of the public library here in Nashville. He lives in Britain, and actually the last one I bought, off of Amazon, because I try to support my fellow authors. And I'm on a program now, or a crusade, or a mission where I'm reading the novels of my fellow authors, especially other historical novelists, and giving them 5-star reviews. And I'm really enjoying it because there are people who pick up the art, or they want to get into writing. They're like, I want to be an author, but I hate reading. Is that okay? Well, it's okay if you don't want to sell any books, because if you don't know what people like to read, if you're not a fan of reading, really, what are you doing? It's like saying, I love cooking, but I hate food. Or, I love making music, but I can't stand the sound of it. You're fooling yourself, man. If you don't love books, if you're not a fan of reading books yourself, what are you doing? You're wasting your time. You're not wasting anybody else's time, because they're not going to read your stuff anyways. Don't worry about it. But yeah, do whatever you want to do. So, as a historical novelist, I take great strides in making sure that I give you, my readers, the most accurate. I mean, really, and there's a little, not just accurate depiction, because I've heard people say that that's a historian's job. An historian will tell you what happened, but a novelist will tell you what it felt like. That's my job. So I take historical accuracy very, very seriously. I do a lot of research, not only before I start writing, but I can't get through a paragraph without looking things up to make sure that I'm getting the things historically accurate, not just getting the time right, but getting like the historical characters. Because if you read any of my novels, you'll see they're filled with actual real historical characters that were there. So I one of the things I think is very important, and I see a lot of other authors do this, is doing what do they call it? Living history. And that's a little bit what I did today. And that's why I'm dressed up like this. Also because I'm a man child. And yes, the little boy in me is so excited to be wearing my Civil War. This is a captain's uniform, infantry. I'm just so excited to do it. But isn't that why we read it? Because, I'll tell you something really funny. I think the sister genre to historical fiction is fantasy or science fiction. And the reason why, and people are like, really? Because it seems like those would be different, but no, because it's escapism. I'm bored to tears. I'm either bored to tears, annoyed, or depressed about today. I don't need to watch a movie or read a book about, World War III almost happening and some hero able to stave it off, because that's actually happening right now anyway. So I don't need fantasy. I want to be taken somewhere else. And so that's personally, I like history. So I know that maybe I have a glamorized romantic idea of history, but there's a nostalgia, and there's something just kind of beautiful, the way the clothes people wore. They're, what I really like, and it's in all my books, is honor culture. I'm really a big fan of that. It's written in all my books, have this sense of like honor amongst enemies, that kind of stuff. And so I think part of being able to give people the texture of what it was like in the past, you got to try. We don't have time machines, right? But what you can do is try to get involved in living history. And that's one of the things I do. Now, how I got into Civil War, well, I won't go into the whole story about me writing Civil War, but if you know me, you know that I've written a trilogy that follows the 2nd Michigan Cavalry into the Civil War in the Western Theater. But if you read my books, you'll see that I have heroes and villains on both sides, which is great because I get to write about the Confederates and the Yankees in my books, and have truly heroes. And I say that because unlike any other thing, like, thank goodness I'm writing the Austro-Prussian War, because Austrians and Prussians today aren't arguing with each other about who is right, who is wrong. It's just history. But unfortunately, here in the United States, we still, there's still a lot of open scars, open wounds, especially in the South. I'm from the North. If you don't know this, if you're not from the United States, you might not know that my accent kind of places me in the North. I'm from Detroit, Michigan. Not only am I from Detroit, Michigan, from the North, but I had ancestors who fought in the American Civil War for the Union. I have a great-great-grandfather, Gustav Engdahl, who fought for the 43rd Illinois Infantry. That was an all German-speaking regiment, even though he was Swedish. The Americans just didn't know what the difference was, so he was probably in there confused as everybody else was. Some poor Swede. He probably thought for like 3 years all these Germans were speaking English to him, and he just didn't understand what they were saying. And then I also, on my mother's side, I understand I have some that fought in Iowan troops, which Iowa went with the Union. So I need to explore. So I, as a Civil War author, I have been invited to do a lot of talks around different groups, and I do Civil War roundtables. I do Sons of Confederate, Sons of Union veterans all over the Mid-South and some places outside of there as well. I love it. And one of my favorite ones to do is I call A Brief History of the American Civil War through Fiddle Tunes. And there's a local Sons of Union veterans here in it's Camp 62, Camp Donaldson, even though we're in Nashville and Fort Donaldson is about an hour drive from here. They've kind of like adopted me as their unofficial novelist and fiddle player. And so I'm a member of Camp 62 of the Union veterans. And just so you know, if I had an ancestor that was in the Confederacy, I would also be part of that as well. And in fact, some of our members are dual members, that they're members in our camp for that because they have ancestors that were Union veterans, and they also have ancestors that are in the Confederacy. We fought a war amongst ourselves. At some point, we had to say, hey, we're on the same side now, and we're all Americans, and we're all happy for that. And I certainly am. And yeah, you can talk about things, about slavery and all that kind of stuff. And that people get very bristled and upset. And no, the war was really about this. No, it was about that. In the end, not everybody, the Civil War ended slavery. Thank goodness for that. And it was really, to me, like an intervention. But I also understand a lot of the guys whose families, are here from the South. Maybe in the beginning, that's why the politicians and the wealthy people seceded from the Union. But then later on, there were people who were literally like, there's armies coming through here, burning our farms and destroying our crops and destroying our homes. We need to fight. And there was a conscription. So I get it. Like, not everybody who was fought for the Confederacy necessarily was signing up because they wanted to hold on to slavery. Although the war did decide that. And okay, we won't go any further because every time, that's what I'm saying. I got to apologize constantly when you write about the American Civil War on either side. But let's get past that. What we did today was a great thing. So I tried to help out as much as possible. And one of the things that the Sons of Union veterans do is we preserve the memory of our brave men and women who fought for the Union, fought for the federal government, and we do dedications, we do educational stuff, and teaching patriotism and that kind of stuff. Well, one of the things that we do is a tombstone dedication, and there was a Captain Dietrich Hesselbein, and he's buried at the Nashville City Cemetery, which is I think a national cemetery, and you have Civil War veterans buried there. It's a very important Civil War, American Civil War site, and it's not far from Fort Negley, which is right down the street, which is also a Civil War fortress. That's actually featured in my third book, Blood for Blood at Nashville. Some of the opening shots for the Battle of Nashville were fired from the cannons up on Fort Negley. So anyway, I was asked if first of all, the call went out to all the members, and like, not only were we looking for us to come out there and participate or be part of the. What was it? First of all, Captain Hesselbein, his I don't know if it was vandalism or theft or just erosion, but his tombstone was missing, and I don't know how long it's been missing. So, Sons of Union Veterans got the funding to have a new tombstone made for him, and we're going to talk about him in a minute. Made for him, and today we had a ceremony in which we dedicated his new tombstone, and it was a really neat thing. In fact, you know what I'll do? Let's see if I can do this. Part of what I'm doing, by the way, because I know I don't get a lot of views just yet, is I'm learning how to do things. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see here. We're going to share an entire screen, which could probably be very dangerous, but you know what? We're just going to do it. We're just going to do it. All right. There's my screen. And hopefully I don't show anything embarrassing. And if I do, just know that I'm not a perfect person. I'm a valuable man. Okay, now I got to. Where are my photos? Okay, I had photos up and I don't see them anymore. I don't know why. There it is. It's behind this thing. All right, everything's got to be a nightmare. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, here we go. Here is Captain Dietrich Hesselbein. Let's make this. Oh, and here's my talk here. So I'm gonna blow this up. Let's see how do we make this. Let's go full screen. How do we do it? How do we go full screen? Maybe it's window. All right. I'll tell you what. I'll just stretch it out. Ugh. Sorry, everybody. It's never easy. All right, here we go. So this was it, and we dedicate. Now I don't actually have photographs from the actual ceremony because I was actually playing fiddle during it. But I just want to show you some things here. I'm gonna back up here. That's Paul. That's the guy who was texting me. I had to text him back because we have a possible gig. That's my uniform you see now. That was this morning, me getting ready to go out there. And here's some of the guys. So we had a ceremony where we rededicated the new tombstone. And as you can see here, I got my fiddle. First of all, Chip, who's the camp commander, wanted a uniformed presence in there. This is the honor guard. They shot muskets in a salute. I think they did 3 rounds. Excuse me. I think there were 4 or 5 of them, maybe just 4. And I was there to play the fiddle. So that's me and Abraham Lincoln, who that reenactor is Dennis Boggs. He's not only is Dennis Boggs a great, he looks the part, but Abraham Lincoln was known for being kind of a comedian, being funny, and always a one-liner artist. And Dennis is very funny too. And you when you're with him, you feel like you're talking to Abraham Lincoln. By the way, notice my iPhone clip here. That's a period correct. That's Abraham Lincoln making me laugh, and then we took a picture together. And then here's there were more of us in this, but here's a good group of the guys who we had honor guard. What happened there? Carried out the flags. Once they brought the flags out and put them into the stands, then I played the Battle Hymn of the Republic on my fiddle. There's my goofy face right there. And then we had, let's see here, Gary Burke is our chaplain, and he did an opening incantation. We had several speakers, including descendants of Captain Hesselbein spoke, and we're going to get to that. It's very interesting. First of all, it's just really interesting to see someone alive today talk about their ancestor that was back in that war. And then we, of course, there's the tombstone. Now, I wish I had, and maybe I will, because I know there were people there were taking video and taking photographs. So if I get more of that, follow me on Facebook, send me a friend request, all that kind of stuff to keep up with me, because I'll share it. All right, I'm going to get back to, let's see if I can find my way back to, there we go. And we'll stop sharing the screen. Okay, now I'm back full screen. So yeah, I feel like I haven't done a whole lot of like the actual reenacting, but I do like doing things in uniform. And because I'm a little boy and I like getting dressed up like I'm playing soldier. It's fun. And of course I was in the military. So there was a lot of that that kind of muscle memory. So I found myself, once I got my jacket buttoned up, I was kind of standing upright. As marching, I was giving crisp salutes, all that kind of stuff. It was a neat day. I feel like it's an important thing to do. And someone asked me if I sold any books there. My friend Paul did. No, I didn't. And if someone would have come up to me and said, "Do you have any books on you?" I would have said, "Yeah," but it would not have been appropriate for me to be like push. I mean, I'm pretty obnoxious, but I do have limits. So I was there to honor Captain Hesselbein. So who was Captain Hesselbein? Well, he was a man who fought for Union. He was a German, and this is where it's really interesting, and it's one of the reasons why it's kind of interesting how like a lot of this stuff is interconnected. So he whatever happened with him, he fled Germany. And now, for a lot of people may not know this, but Germany wasn't really there wasn't a Germany. I mean, there was a Germany, but there wasn't a nation called Germany until 1870. 1870 or 1871. It's right after the Franco-Prussian War, in which King Wilhelm the First is proclaimed Emperor, Kaiser Wilhelm the First, and we're going to talk about him too at the Palace of Versailles. And Germany, which had up to that point been a collection of dukedoms and kingdoms and free states and things like that, they proclaimed it as an empire, and it stayed Germany from there on out. Of course, real quick history, that's the German Empire. It goes from Wilhelm I to Frederick the Third to Wilhelm II. Wilhelm II is the guy who gets Germany involved in World War I. Of course, at the end of World War I, Wilhelm II is deposed. I think he lives the rest of his life in exile in the Netherlands or Belgium or somewhere in the Low Countries. And he's actually alive at the beginning of World War II, but he doesn't live out. He dies of old age during that time. And then after the fall of the empire, there is the German Republic, the Weimar Republic, which is then taken over by Hitler and the Nazis, and World War II. And then Germany is divided once again to an East and West Germany, where East Germany is really a Soviet puppet state. And then the Soviet Union collapses, and then we have reunification. And now we have a very wonderful country, Germany, a united Germany that's part of NATO, who for the first time is allowed to militarize at the threat of Russia and Russia's aggression in Ukraine and our neighbors. And I won't get too much into politics, but I'm a big fan of a remilitarized Germany in the face of our Russian enemies right now, and not the people. I love Russian people. Vladimir Putin's got to go, man. That's all I gotta say. Let's have democracy and stay out of other people's countries. I'm sure some of my Confederate friends are saying, "Yeah, stay out of our country, jerk." So anyway, we had a good time. Like I said, I played the battle hymn, and then afterwards I played taps. I kind of screwed it up because they're like, okay, after there's a 3-gun salute, and then you play taps. A 3-shot salute, and so I'm like, okay, and so there were 4 of them. And so I was like, oh, well, now we got 4. Maybe we had 3. And so they fire off a round, and I start playing taps, and I get done. And then they fire off a second round, and I'm like, oh, it's not 3 musketeers, it's 4 musketeers, fusiliers, and they're going to fire off 3 rounds, and then I play. So I played taps twice, but everybody's cool about that. It was pretty funny. So yeah, okay, I forgot where I was going. We're talking about, we already did that part. We're going to do the part about who is Captain Dietrich Hesselbein. So he fled Germany in 1848, and during 1848 was a year of revolution all across Europe. And I think the one in France was the only one that was successful. The one in France is the one that took down the July monarchy. It took down Louis Philippe, and it replaced him with a republic. And of course, the very first person they elect is Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, which is the nephew of the famous Napoleon. And at the end of his term, he says, I think I'm just going to go ahead and be an emperor. And so then you have the Second Empire. So, France took a while to get their republics down. They had a hard time doing that. But so the revolution, and this is like the second or third, this is like the third revolution. So you had multiple revolutions that, the people's getting their heads chopped off, and Napoleon and Louis XVI, all that stuff. That's 1790s. There was another there's a few more rounds of revolution. There's the one of 32 that took down the return of the Bourbons and put Louis Philippe, who was an Orleans, on the throne. And then there was the 48 one. The ones in Germany didn't go so well, and the one that I'm particularly knowledgeable about is the one in Prussia, and the one that happened in Berlin, in which the king and his men, I think William Frederick the Fourth. I could be wrong on that, but he, the people rose up, and actually, what happened is, and I'll tell you the reason why I kind of know about this is because it's in the book I'm writing right now called The Prussian Prince. So we go back to 1848, and we do a little bit of this revolt that kind of put some things in motion that's in my novel. That later gets caught up to 1866, but basically the people wanted democracy, and Prussia was an absolute monarchy, and the people wanted a constitution. They weren't trying to get rid of the king; they just wanted a king that would have to adhere to a representational, like a parliament, like a Reichstag. And they wanted some fundamental rights like Americans had. They wanted freedom of press, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, freedom of association, these kind of things. And the people rose up. Now there were those who were like middle ground liberals. And just when I say that, don't get upset now, no one get upset. When we talk about the 19th century and we talk about liberalism and conservatism, it's not MAGA hats and purple-haired people with confused pronouns. It's not our version of today. In fact, today, everybody today, all the Republicans and Democrats would be considered radical liberals in 1848. And I'll tell you the simplest thing about the difference between, and this is not me taking a side at all, because I consider myself a centrist and believe that we should have a strong left and right so that we can have a well-guided center, is that it's the way you look at the world. A conservative looks at the world. No, let's start with the liberals. Liberals look at the world and they say, no, none of this is any good. We got to throw all this out. And it's not fair, and we gotta make it fair for everybody. Everything that came before is wrong. We gotta change it. We gotta change everything. The conservatives look at everything and say, "Hey, whoa. Everything's fine the way it is. Don't change anything. You're gonna screw it up." Or they say, "It was actually better before. We need to go back to those days when things were better. Which one is right or wrong? I actually think that this is why I consider myself a centrist. I think it's because you need liberals to push new ideas. And some of their ideas are stupid and some of them are great. And some of them, the conservatives think are stupid, but later on will espouse them as being great and then make them their principles. On the other side, with the conservatives, you need some adults in the room to say, no, that's crazy. That's too much. So there's somewhere in between, like, what's all this crazy new ideas, and these people are like, no, let's not change things. Somewhere you're going to find good, steady progress, and that's what I believe. If you don't believe that, I have no problem with you. I hope you have no problem with me. So if you are a liberal or you are a conservative, you're still a friend of mine. And I'm not just saying that because I want you to buy my books. I really do mean that. I really do. So anyway, the people marched onto the palace at Berlin where the king was. And there were hundreds of thousands. And all of a sudden, the king is like with his pants down. He doesn't have enough troops to defend the palace. There are enough people out there to overwhelm them. They're scared. And so the king goes out there and he makes a speech, and he basically says, he does a little bit of a red herring because he knows that one of their demands is they want a unified Germany. Because nationalism was a big thing, even amongst liberals at that time. They wanted a ethno state of ethnic German and culturally German and linguistically German people all living together in a Germany. So he went up there and he's like, hey, I hear you. We're listening to you. We got plans in the works. We're going to start moving towards a united Germany. And everybody's like, yay, yay. And he's like, all right, you guys have a good day. And he goes back inside. And then someone's like, but what about the freedom of speech? What about freedom of assembly? What about freedom of religion? All that kind of stuff. And the king, didn't address that stuff. And so then people started getting crazy. And somewhere, as Mike Duncan will always say, if you listen to his Revolutions podcast, which I learned a lot from this in that, is that whether it was somebody from the king's side or from the people, a gun goes off. Then more guns go off. And then there's panic. And then you have guys like, and this I'll jump ahead a little bit because he's in my book, the man who will be Kaiser William I. He is the brother of the king, but he'll eventually be king when William Frederick has a heart attack or a stroke and is incapacitated. And he and his men roll out cannons and load them with grape shot. If you don't know what grape shot is, most people, when you think about a cannon, you think like a cannonball, like a round ball, which there were those things. So it's called solid shot. There are shells that explode. Grape shot is an anti-personnel round. And basically think of it as a shotgun. If you don't know what a shotgun is, like a regular gun, like a rifle or a pistol shoots a bullet, a single bullet. It's usually conical and it spins and it's very directional. It's very accurate and it's got a lot of distance. A shotgun shell is like a little plastic tube full of BBs. And when it fires, it spreads out a shot. We use them a lot for like hunting birds because it's, you don't have to hit it with one, just as long as you hit it with that burst of shot, it's going to take it down. Well, that's what a grape shot does. And they call it grape because it looks like a bunch of grapes, but it's basically shooting like a bucket full of musket balls at a crowd of people. And that's what he did. And he got that name, the Prince of Grape Shot. Was he right in doing that? Okay, now I'll just say this. I write about war. I understand war is a terrible thing. Violence is a terrible thing. I don't know. He's defending the palace. He's defending the king. Was it necessary to fire a grape shot into the crowds? I wasn't there. Probably not. It's probably not a good idea. I know that they were very scared afterwards, not the crowds, but the king. And afterwards, they had a state funeral for the the rebels. The king did for the people because he's about to lose. Louis Philippe just lost his throne in France. King of Prussia wasn't going to go down that road. So he's kissing ass. He's like, oh no, we're listening to you and we feel really bad about this. And they had a big funeral and all that kind of stuff. It's in my book, by the way. But once the crowds go home and all of a sudden, one by one, the leaders are disappearing off the street, because you can't take them down while they're all together. But as soon as they disband, now you can go secret police, go out there and start arresting people. And so there was a huge influx of German immigrants coming to the United States and other places, true, as well. But the U.S., if you're not an American, you probably don't know this, but many Americans have Native American in them, like I do. They have Irish in them, like I do. They got German in them, like I do. It's because all these people end up on this continent. During the Native Americans came over during the Ice Age. They came out of Asia. But a lot of Germans, a lot of Poles, a lot of Irish in the 19th century and early 20th century come over to the United States. And most of us, in one form or the other, are the sons and daughters of immigrants. And so the Germans that fled, and it's not just Prussia, it was Hesse and Hesse, it was Bavaria, it was all these places. Even Austria had, and Austrians are Germans, by the way. What the big difference between an Austrian and a German? They're all Germans. We can get into that later, but basically Austrians are, for the most part, Catholic Germans. And when Germany was created, there was an idea of possibly including Austria in that. But because of the religious difference and political difference in the rivalry between Austria and Prussia, Otto von Bismarck made sure that, in fact, the war that is in my book I'm writing right now, the Austro-Prussian War, was fought to keep Austria out of a united Germany. But we won't get too far into the weeds with that. But what happened is that thousands, tens of thousands of Germans fled Germany because of the failed revolutions of 48. Either they wanted to get away from the violence and the political disruption, or they were actual revolutionaries themselves. And a lot of them brought a lot of that same liberal ideas. Now, once again, when I say liberal ideas, I'm not talking about pronouns and purple hair. And I'm just kidding. So don't get mad at me if you're a liberal and you think I'm making fun of you. But ideas of democracy and union. So remember this, okay? Because Germany is a divided land. It comes out of, at one point they were tribes that one time united and beat the Romans in a famous battle. And I won't go too deep into that. But other than that, they were divided tribes until the Romans come. After the fall of the Roman Empire, right around, I gotta say, it's probably around 600-700 AD. I could be wrong, but the formation of the Holy Roman Empire, which is basically Italy and Austria, the Germanys, Switzerland, all that kind of stuff, is Holy Roman Empire, which is basically a loose confederation of kingdoms, dukedoms, princedoms, and all that kind of stuff that have a loose confederation, which is the Holy Roman Empire, in which the emperor is elected not for a term, but like for life, until then they decide who's going to be. Eventually becomes the Habsburgs over and over and over again. I think in 1806, Napoleon crushes the Holy Roman Empire, crushes Austria, crushes Prussia and all the German states, and instead creates the German Confederation of the Rhine. And then, of course, the German states fight the wars of German liberation, which is also known as the War of the Sixth Coalition. Eventually, they defeat him, Napoleon and the French, and throw the French out of their country, and then start. I think it's called the German Confederation, which Austria was a part of. But then after the Austro-Prussian War, they're excluded, and now it's called the Northern German. Anyway, I'm getting too far. Anyway, all this is about the guy we put a tombstone on his grave today. I know I go too far on tangents. So Dietrich Hesselbein was one of the 48ers. And that was the name that they gave. Not the 49ers. Those are the guys that went on the gold rush. But the 48ers were the Germans that came over to the United States. And a lot of them, because in Germany, like, for example, Prussia, almost every single man served at least 2 years in the Prussian army, and then another 6 in reserve. So the old joke about Prussia is that most states have an army. Prussia is an army that has a state. The Prussians are very militaristic. So for Dietrich, once he comes to the United States, I think he settles in St. Louis. And at the beginning of the war, he gets a commission in the 6th Kentucky Infantry. And just so you know, a lot of people, the simple view of the American Civil War is North against South. And that's a very simple way. And you're not completely wrong to think it in those terms, but it's a very simplified way of thinking. There were plenty of Northern-born generals who served in the Confederacy. Pemberton, who is the general who defended Vicksburg, who lost to Ulysses S. Grant on the 4th of July, 1863, was a Northerner. I think he was from Pennsylvania? I can't remember. But and vice versa, there were plenty of Southerners, Southern-born men, who said, no, I am not part of this Confederacy. I'm part of the United States of America. Swore an oath. A good example is George Thomas, the general who defended Nashville against John Hood. He was a Virginian. His family were all Confederates. They disowned him because he stayed loyal to the Union and fought for the Union, and he was a great general. So one of the things that happened is people say Kentucky isn't it a southern state? Well, one of the jokes about Kentucky is Kentucky's the only state to join the Confederacy after the war, because there's a lot of Kentuckians who have an affinity for the South. And let me just tell you, the South is a nation, and in the true sense of a nation. A nation is not necessarily a state. A nation is a group of people that are connected with a shared identity, a shared cultural, linguistic, ethnic identity. So yes, the South, Black, whites, Hispanic, everybody who lives here, there is a sense of nationhood, of being in the South, that the North really doesn't have. But there are people that are very proud. They're proud to be Americans. They're Americans first, but they also feel fundamentally Southern. And I'm not talking about nothing racist or nothing about the Confederacy. There's just a certain pride about being from the South. The South has a culture unto itself. And I'll tell you personally, I love it. It's why I live down here. The food, the music, and it's not, I'm telling you, most of that culture that we call Southern is Black. The food, the music, all that kind of stuff stems out of that. So anyway, there are a lot of troops that are Kentucky, legitimately sent official troops to fight for the Union. So there were Union troops that were raised in Kentucky. So like the Kentucky 6th Infantry was a Union troop. So was the 10th Tennessee, because Tennessee had 80,000 men from Tennessee, native-born Tennesseans, who volunteered for the Union, who fought in Union regiments, and there were Tennessee regiments. The reason why I bring up the 10th is because I guess I'm unofficially part of the 10th. I didn't realize this, but because I'm part of Camp 62 of Sons of Union Veterans, I'm also affiliated with the 10th Tennessee. So I might get more and more into that. I think it's very interesting. I like the reenactment stuff. It's fun. I like wearing the uniforms. I like, playing with the guns and camping and all that kind of stuff. And I'm a boy. I'm a man child. That's why I write the books. That's why I read the books. I'm basically living that passion that I felt when I was 12 years old. I was 12 years old and I was making swords in the backyard and pretending and playing war. And yeah, war's terrible. I get that, but I'm just celebrating my boyhood, right? So Dietrich joins the 6th Kentucky. I don't know much about his story. He was a carpenter, just like my grandfather. Before he joined, he was commissioned as a first lieutenant. He rose to the rank of captain, which is what I'm wearing right here, the captain bars. And he actually survives the war. I believe he settled in Nashville afterwards. And he fought at Shiloh, he fought at some other places, but he fought at the Battle of Nashville, which is in my 3rd book. And afterwards, he settles in Nashville. He died in 1870, so he actually died 5 years after the war. But he was buried in the Nashville City Cemetery. And if you ever come to Nashville, it's a place to visit. I would like to someday put together a tour of the Battle of Nashville, because unlike Shiloh, unlike Gettysburg, there's not a lot that's still there. I mean, it's still there, but it's covered in parking lots and condos and things like that. But I've done a lot of research on the Battle of Nashville, and I understand the fundamental beats of the battle. And when I write battles, and I've written a lot of them, and usually if it's a major battle, it usually takes about 2 chapters of my book. There's so much to write about. I mean, you could write volumes. You could write an entire nonfiction book based off of one battle, and you still wouldn't get everything in it. So what I try to do is I try to look at the fundamental beats, like the fundamental turning point, the starting points, the fundamental beats the along the way that gets us to the conclusion. And I feel like I do a pretty good job. And I like to do macro, micro, where like show you big picture, then go in small, show you some action, big picture, that kind of stuff like that. So anyway, he's buried there. We honored him today. We gave him a new tombstone. What happened to his old one, we don't know. It could have been stolen. It could have just weathered away. There's some old broken ones in the back of the cemetery that, maybe gone 50 years. Someone figured out that he was missing a tombstone. So the Sons of Union Veterans raised the funds to have a new one made. We got his family members out there. We had some speakers. And we had a nice ceremony. And the one thing I was really scared about is that it was threatening rain all week long. It said it was like 60% of chance of rain today. And I told Chip, because look, my fiddle, I have 2. I have a really nice one and I got a cheap one. I actually play my cheap one more. I would love it. It's a great fiddle. They're both great fiddles. And I don't care about it getting wet. Nothing like that. It's fine. The problem is if the bow hair gets wet, then it won't grip the strings. And if it doesn't grip the strings, it won't make a sound. It'll just slide up and down silently. So I said, if it's raining and it's really misty, I might not be able to play. There was a lovely woman there that helped me out. She held my umbrella so that so I could play without getting my bow wet. That was great. And we pulled it off. All right. So we talked about the living history. Whatever it is, I got a friend, Daz, out in the United Kingdom. He does not only American Civil War, where he dresses just like an American Civil War soldier, but he does English Civil War as well, where I think he dresses up like a Roundhead. I'd be more of a royalist, I think. I think living history is great, and I've seen people do it. Civil War's one. It's very popular. I've seen World War II. I've seen, even like Renaissance festivals. There's a troupe on Facebook that does the War of the Roses, which is one of my favorite. I think War of the Roses, the Napoleonic Wars, the American Civil War, World War II are probably some of my favorite ones as far as just uniforms and just like the look and the feel and all that. World War I too. I mean, I know war's bad, but I'm the little boy in me, the romantic in me. So the last thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about Kaiser Wilhelm I, the first emperor of Germany. And all this kind of really made sense to me because I'm writing the Battle of Königgrätz right now in my book called The Prussian Prince. And that book is about Karl trying to get back to his wife, and he comes home to Detroit and finds that she has gone back to Prussia. So he goes to Prussia to be with her, and hijinks ensues. And next thing you know, he's marching to Austria in the Prussian army, and it'll make sense when you read this. And I wrote about that riot, that revolt of '48 in Berlin. It was one of many, and they went from Greece all the way to Paris. They're all over Europe. There were revolts and rebellions, and so I felt like this was all connected to that. And I was writing about Willem. Let me show you. Let's see if I can pull up Willem without making a disaster here. I'm gonna let's see here. I'm gonna go to I'll go to Chrome. I'm already on Chrome. So the Prussia. And I understand this. A lot of us Americans, we don't learn a lot of. We learn history, but we learn history of that pertains to us. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm trying to not apologize too much, but a lot of them don't understand. Like, for example, European history of the 19th century. Very few people know about it because we got our own problems, right? And so, and a lot of people probably don't understand. They probably heard the word Prussia. They don't know what it means, especially because it sounds close to the word Russia. And some people might think, and actually my character is, I did this on purpose. A lot of Americans don't understand that Prussia and Russia are two different things. The etymology of those words, I found out, have nothing to do with each other. Nothing to do. It's just, it's coincidence that they come. The Russians are the Rus Vikings that came and conquered the Slavs. I can't remember, but probably before 1000 AD, and set up principalities that eventually turns into an empire in which you have a Kaiser, or a Czar, Kaiser, Emperor, Caesar. It all means the same thing. It's just different languages saying the same thing. Let me find my way back to my camera so I can see myself. So, like we talked about the Holy Roman Empire and Germany. And what was Germany before it was a nation? Germany was just the land named after the Romans named the people that lived up in that area Germans, or Germania. They called it Germania. And I can't remember my Latin's terrible, but basically Germany and German, because they don't call themselves that. They call Germany Deutschland, and they call the Germans Deutsch, and in the language Deutsch. It's, for some reason in English we use the Latin version of the name, which is Germany. And I think some of the Latin languages, like French and Italian and Spanish, use Alemand, something like that. There's a different. I mean, everybody has a different word for Germany because it was kind of an ill-defined place. It's just this, basically the area west of or east of the Rhine, and I don't know, west of Poland. Even though at some point most of Poland was part of Prussia, the Prussians were a pagan tribe that came out of like north central Poland, and eventually Christianized. They become part of, I think it's the Electorate of Prussia, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which eventually becomes part of the Holy Roman Empire. At some point, and I don't know the history very well, but at some point, Prussia is basically elevated from a dukedom to a kingdom, and they have their first king. And I can't remember who that was, but then you get the Fredericks, including Frederick the Great. I think Frederick the Great is Frederick the Second. And I think it's his father is the one who militarized them, because they were kind of a small landlocked. Were they landlocked all the time? But they were kind of a small country, but yet they were able to project a lot of military strength with their small numbers because they were very militaristic, which every single able-bodied man was expected to serve time in the Prussian military. Once again, Prussia is an army that has a state, not a state that has an army. And I think Frederick the Great was his time was like the 7 Years' War, which we Americans would probably call the French Indian War. In Europe, it was the 7 Years' War, and Prussia really did well for themselves. I think that's where they captured Silesia, which is now part of Poland. And Frederick the Great. By the way, Frederick the Great's great military leader, great king of Prussia, gay, and an accomplished flautist. He played the flute, which has nothing to do with being gay. He was gay and he played the flute, probably in a very masculine way. But but he was a great military mind. And there's a great painting where he's like, I love Frederick the Great, and they were known to be this militaristic, this really terrifying army. But what happened to Prussia after that is when you get high and then you get used to being up there and you forgot what got you there. So then after Frederick the Great, their military starts diminishing because it stops being a meritocracy and it becomes more of an oligarchy. It becomes, men get ranked because who their fathers are. And they get soft, they get weak. And then eventually when the French get strong and Napoleon comes, he absolutely wipes the floor with the Prussians. Absolutely humiliates the Prussians so much that when he has peace treaties with the Tsar, the Prussians are allowed to attend, but not even to talk because they are a occupied, defeated people. They have no cards at the table. Huge humiliation for him. And there's a great story about this because Napoleon was a student of history, loved military history, was an admirer of people. And he was an admirer of Frederick the great Prussian king. And when they conquered, the French march into Berlin, they take Berlin, and one of the things that Napoleon insisted on is they went to Frederick the Great's tomb. And when they got there, and he had his generals with him, his marshals of France, and they kind of stayed back because the emperor was very moody. He was very introspective. He was kind of an actually socially awkward introvert. And so they know when to give him his space. And so Napoleon goes into the tomb, and he's in there for a while, and he's just contemplating, communing with the ghost of Frederick the Great, the once great Prussian king, the Prussia that he has just conquered and humiliated. And he walks out of the tomb and he looks at his generals and he said, "Gentlemen, if that man were alive today, we would not be here." And that was a great moment when Napoleon was giving respect to Frederick the Great, because he knew if Frederick the Great was here, there's no way France would have conquered Prussia. Interesting thing, regardless of what you think, and I agree with you. Let's just say this right now: Hitler and the Nazis are horrible, terrible. Okay, but I think it's an interesting story that then, 130 years later. Or maybe a little bit more, 140 years later, the Germans, the Nazis, take Paris, and it wasn't the first time, by the way. They take Paris. They took it in the Franco-Prussian War too. But when Hitler comes in, you've seen the photographs of Hitler posing in front of the Eiffel Tower. I think he was pretending like he was holding but there's pictures of him standing there with his generals, and they're smiling, and I'm like tourists. There's Hitler and there's the Eiffel Tower. But one of the things that Hitler did when he took Paris is that Hitler went and visited the tomb of Napoleon, and it was all a reflexive thing because Napoleon had visited Frederick the Great. Hitler visited Napoleon's tomb. And just so you know, Napoleon died in St. Helena in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean because they were so, Napoleon, yeah, they were so afraid that he was going to come back. They put him in the middle of the Atlantic so there was no way anybody would be caught unaware. Or he died of stomach cancer, but they later brought him back to France and gave him his due. Was Napoleon a great guy, a bad guy? He's a little everything, like we all are, right? I'm an admirer of Napoleon, but I'm also recognize a lot of the bad things about Napoleon too. But I think that's an interesting story. So Willem was the king of Prussia let's back up. In 1848, he was a prince of Prussia. His brother had, and I think it's William IV is his brother. And I have it in my notes, and it's right in my book. I just don't have it in front of me. His brother is the one who is dealing with the revolution. And an interesting thing, there was an attempt to create like kind of a United States of Germany and with a liberal constitution, and they offered William to be emperor, and he turned it down because he says, no, I will not take a crown from the gutter, meaning I won't take the people don't give me a crown. God gives me the crown. William was, I'm sorry, his brother, I can't remember his name. I think it's William Frederick I can't remember, but his brother was an absolute monarchist and didn't want he didn't want to be an emperor if it meant that he only was an emperor because the people allowed it. No, a crown only comes from God, and it comes from other monarchs that do it, and that's the only way he would accept it. So he didn't, and they had this revolution where they almost took him down. His brother, William I, that's the William I'm talking about now. His brother, who's not king at the time, is the one who let out the cannons and grape shot into the crowd and got the name the Prince of Grape Shot. That's William I, who will become king. He was never supposed to be king. His father put him in the Prussian army when he was 12 and gave him a military education. He about 6 years later, probably as a teenager in his 20s, he earns the Iron Cross in fighting in the wars of German liberation against Napoleon. This is after Prussia had been humiliated by Napoleon and conquered. Now the Prussians are in France, taking it back. I don't know exactly what he did, but the interesting thing about the Iron Cross is a lot of people associate it with the Nazis. Well, the Nazis were the last ones that used it. I don't think it's still around today. It should be, because it's not a Nazi thing. And first of all, a lot of people don't understand the Nazis didn't just come out of nowhere. There's a lot that builds. Not everything before them were Nazis, but a lot of the things that the Nazis appropriated were already in motion in the 19th century, and the Iron Cross is one of them. And here's what it is: after Prussia was conquered by the French and turned into a French client kingdom, they were humiliated. The kingdom that was once ruled by Frederick the Great were now the slaves of the French. It wasn't until Napoleon was defeated by the Russian winter and was coming back. He went into, I can't remember now. I think he goes into Russia with like 400,000 men and returns with 40,000. Now that the emperor is on his knees, the Prussians rise up and start fighting against him. But they made a lot of changes to their military. They got rid of nepotism and went to a merit-based system only. And one of the things they did, even though they were into absolute monarchy from the grace of God, they were embracing a lot of meritocracy and that all men are equal. And so, and basically they opened up the ranks so even a common man could rise in rank in the Prussian army and be an officer, be a leader. And by the way, there were Jews. I can't remember what year it was, because anti-Semitism has always been part of Europe, and guess what? It's still there now. And I know because I've seen it with my own eyes the times I lived there. But the Prussians even allowed the Jews that they weren't crazy about into the military, and there were Jews that were serving the Prussian military. And guess what? A lot of people don't know this. Hitler's commanding officer in World War I was a Jew who thought highly of Hitler and recommended him for the Iron Cross. So it is crazy, right? The Iron Cross was the first medal that the Prussians came up with that anybody could earn. All it took was an act of courage. And so you could be a private from the streets. You could be a prince. It did not matter your rank. It did not matter who your father was. It didn't matter if you were a Catholic, Jew, or Protestant. If a Pole, a Gypsy, it didn't matter. If you did something great in battle, something heroic, you were going to get that Iron Cross. It was an equalizer. And so William I got one at a battle. I can't remember the name of it, but it's in France. For bravery. He was at Waterloo, where the emperor was finally defeated. He had a hatred for the French for the rest of his life. He never forgave as a little boy watching French troops, watching his father humiliated, watching French troops march, because he was the second son. His dad was king during that time. Watching the French troops march and parade down the streets of Berlin. Never forgave them. Never forgave them. And so in my book now, he makes a brief appearance, or actually I mentioned him as the Prince of Grapeshot, but then he is at the Battle of Königgrätz. And so the Battle of Königgrätz is the big decisive battle of the Austro-Prussian War. It's pretty much like Gettysburg. There were battles afterwards. And actually, Gettysburg is a bad example because Gettysburg is just the midpoint. It's the turning point, but it's not the end of the war by any means. There were battles after Königgrätz, but Königgrätz broke the Austrian Imperial Army, and it was just a matter of skirmishing until the Austrian Emperor Franz Joseph had to capitulate. Interesting enough, the Austrian Emperor Franz Joseph, who capitulated to the Prussians in 1866, is the same Franz Joseph, Emperor of Austria, at the beginning of World War I. He had a very long reign. He was not a bad guy, but in fact, he had some 19th century liberal leanings, cared about his people. There's a great show on Netflix. It's an Austrian-made show, but they have you can watch it with English subtitles, or you can watch it dubbed over in English. It's called The Empress, and it's about Sissy. And actually, I watched it, and it's kind of made for women. It's a little bit of a schmaltzy historical romance, but it's really good. It's remarkably historically accurate. I mean, I'm not saying it's perfect, but they did a pretty good job. What's great about it is, you want to talk about strong female, characters. And, I'm not one of those people that it's like, oh, it's got to have a strong female lead, although I have a lot of it in my books. But here's some great female historical characters, including Franz Joseph's mother, the dowager, the Princess Sophie, who was even before he was emperor, they called her the only man in Vienna because she was so tough. And she's the one, because I think the previous emperor, he was physically disabled, possibly mentally disabled too. He had an average of like like 20 seizures a day. There was something wrong with him. Maybe I don't know if he was mentally, but certainly, and Austria was falling apart. And I think during the Revolution 48 is when he got taken down. Sophie's husband, who she despised, should have been emperor, but she was able to get him to capitulate to his son, Franz Joseph. Franz Joseph becomes emperor of Austria in 1848, with his mother basically running the country and using him as a sock puppet. Eventually, he outgrows his mom. He loses the war against Prussia. Doesn't really get that. Otto von Bismarck was very smart. He told the king, the Prussian king, do not take any land from the Prussians. All we want is to get them out of Holstein, Schleswig, which is to the north, that they never owned anyway. That's all we want. We don't want to make them enemies. We want them to be allies because France is next. And if we piss off the Austrians, they're going to want revenge and they're going to team up with the French. We don't need that. Let's keep them happy. Let's keep them friends. And that friendship in 1866, after the Prussians, beat the Austrians and take very little from them, that friendship will last. So that when the crown prince of Austria gets assassinated in Sarajevo, the Germans, who were once the Prussians and now the Germans, are going to come to little brother's rescue and World War I, which, by the way, World War I was just kind of unfinished business where they rang the bell and the two sides went to their corners for 20 years and then ding, 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 round two, World War II. So all this is connected. So William the First, 69 years old, when Helmuth von Moltke, who is the General Chief of Staff, and Bismarck, he's like, Your Highness, Your Majesty, we think we got the Austrians against the ropes. Why don't we go down there and oversee the decisive battle? So they do. They go down there. And William the First, 6'1", he's 69 years old. He's wearing the pickle helm. It's the helmet with the brass spike on there. He's got these heavy, bushy sideburns and a mustache that twirls up a little bit, and he's got this kind of German grimace that I got too. And people always think that we're mad. We're not. We just look. We got resting bitch face. He's got resting bitch face, and he loves his cannons. So when they clear out Dub Hill, which is basically this high point that's overlooking the valley, that's the Elbe Beatrice River Valley, in which Königgrätz anchors the other side. They come up there, and he brings his cannons. And in the Ulan cavalry escort, shell comes and it hits one of those guys right next to him and just destroys this man and his horse right next to the king. He's not afraid of anything. In fact, there's a famous line in my book. It actually happened the night before. But Otto von Bismarck, who was actually a civilian who liked to wear a uniform, but he was no soldier, he's a little scared because they're very close to the action. And he says to Moltke, he goes, isn't it dangerous for us to be here? And Moltke goes, yeah, in war, everything's dangerous. I love that line. I put it in my book, but I just moved it to that morning where they're up on the hilltop where shells did actually explode by them and actually did kill part of their escort. But this man is 69 years old. He has spent his entire life. I mean, he's king now. He's only been king since like 1861. So he's been king for 5 years. He has spent his entire life in the Prussian military and he's fought Napoleon. He's fought rebels. He's fought everybody. He's 69 years old. He's still placing cannons and sitting on his horse and looking down. And below this valley in the morning, it's covered in fog, so they can't even see. There might be just 3 divisions. It might be the entire northern Austrian army. But what you can see is like this boiling because the cannons are firing down there. So it's like a cloud with like thunderbolts flashing through it, like a cauldron of boiling violence. And this king sitting on top of this mountain looking down with that look. Oh, let me show you what he looks like. I just and once again, I know probably not the best human being in the world. I get it. Okay, we're gonna share this. All right, so here's some pictures of him. I like this one right here. Look at that look on his face. You know, and he just looks like, man, like, don't mess with me. Like, I'm not taking a bunch of bullshit. There's his Iron Cross, by the way. There's the Iron Cross. It looks like he won a couple of them. He's got a couple badges. And, you know, he's not just a guy, he's king, so let's give him a bunch of stuff. Yeah, he was heck of a guy. Did some bad things for sure. Yeah, I've never fired grape shot into civilians. So, but what I'm saying is, from a distance, I can kind of admire him a little bit. I like him. This picture right here, this is. Let's see if we can blow that up without. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong thing. Well, we'll get to that. He anyway, the spoiler alert, the Prussians absolutely demolished the Austrians at Königgrätz. Königgrätz is one of the biggest battles in Europe to the date. It certainly is much larger than Waterloo. A lot of people don't know about it because it's not as sexy as Waterloo. But here, let's see if I can open this up. Let's see, new tab. All right, let's see how that works. I want the picture, not the stupid article. Let's see if I can do open image in new tab. Okay, let's see if that works. Yeah, here we go. That's my boy right there. That's my boy right there. Let's blow that up. Okay, we're going to talk about this in a minute. All right. Oh, but it's still doing this. Okay, wait a minute. Let me see if I can. Let's remove that. Let's okay, let's stop share, and then let's do share. Part of what I'm doing, because I know I don't have a big audience, is I'm just learning how to do some of this stuff. There we go. There we go. Let's share that. All right. And then if I come back to here, now I can see myself and I can see the picture. Great. So they win. He's 69 years old. It's 1866. This is all Otto von Bismarck's master plan. Bismarck is not a soldier, but he's a politician. And what Bismarck wants is a German empire that excludes Austria and puts Wilhelm on the throne. He next manufactures a war against France in which he tricks France into declaring war on them to make France the aggressor, and then immediately Moltke and his armies just bulldoze France because France has no answer for the Prussian military. And this part of this, like, tit for tat that the French and the Germans have, and it goes all the way back to Frederick the Great, and we talked a little bit about that. The Germans eventually lay siege to Paris. Actually, this is really interesting, and I got to look this up because I might have this wrong. So please forgive me if I got this wrong, and let me know if I'm incorrect. But a couple things happened. First of all, the Battle of Sedan. The Emperor Louis Napoleon III, who was the Emperor of France, who was a very sick man, goes out in uniform to be amongst the troops at the Battle of Sedan and gets captured. And there's a famous painting of Louis Napoleon who's captured and Otto von Bismarck sitting on a park bench together. Bismarck is the conquering hero and Napoleon is defeated, but they're friends because Bismarck had been the Prussian ambassador to France for years, and so they had a relationship and they did like each other. So even though Louis Napoleon is a defeated man and he is sitting with his captor. They're having a cordial conversation because they like each other and they are friends. After Louis Napoleon was conquered or captured, that marked the end of the Second French Empire, and so the parliament or whatever the legislative branch, I can't remember what they call it in France. They decide to, while the emperor is in captivity, to depose him and declare a new French republic. The problem is there are communists. There are communists and socialists and anarchists. And no offense if you're one of those things. I am not. I'm just not a big fan of collectivism. They rise up not against Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte, but against the new French Republic. And they basically, much like they did during like 2020, like in Portland and all that, they cordon off blocks and blocks of Paris, and they proclaim the Paris Commune. And a lot of this is where you get the word communism from. They were proto-communists that wanted to have a socialist government, a workers' paradise, and now they're not only fighting the Prussians, but they're fighting the French Republic. And I believe, and I could be wrong, and I just haven't done the research because I'm not there yet, because this is going to be not the book I'm writing now, but the next book. But I believe that the new French Republic teamed up with the invading Prussians to lay siege to the Paris Commune, and lay siege to Paris, and it was bad. It got so bad they were starving. The communists, they were eating dogs and rats and maybe even each other. Eventually, the Prussians are able to, and the French Republic are able to break through and destroy the Paris Commune and keep Paris and France from turning into the first fully communist country in the world. And once all that is in place, then they go to the Palace of Versailles. And just so you know, Versailles is not in Paris. It's probably about a half-hour drive out. Now it was built by Louis the XIV, because of uprisings in the cities, he wanted a place that was away from the rabble so that he didn't have to worry about. Because I think when he was a child, the people, like during the reign of Louis the XIII, the people actually broke into the palace and got into the future king's bedroom when he was a child, and he was scarred from that for life. So so now that everything's taken care of, the Prussians have decided, in a kind of a little bit of irony here, they go to Versailles and to celebrate. And just so you know, I can name some of these people. This right here is Helmut von Moltke. He is, I believe that's who that is. He is the general chief of staff. He's the military genius. He's the one who has given Prussia its victories over France and Austria. This is Otto von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor, Prime Minister. I can't remember, but he is basically, he's the one who's actually running the show. Like the king rules, but the prime minister or the chancellor is the one who's the day-to-day. Here's him in his white uniform. He's got his pickle help here. But he is the one who has masterminded this whole thing that took Prussia from a kingdom and turned the Prussian king, William I, to the first German emperor. And they basically proclaim their empire at Versailles in France, and William I is emperor. Behind him is Friedrich Wilhelm, and that's his son. This is the crown prince. He is in my book right now, and he's one of the reasons why it's called the Prussian Prince. Wilhelm Friedrich was a very interesting guy. He was a brilliant military leader. He did very well in the Schleswig-Holstein War. He did very well in the Austro-Prussian War. He was commander of the Prussian Second Army, and he did very well in the Franco-Prussian War. He hated war. He was, by 19th century terms, a liberal who wanted to have representational government, one that he'd be king or emperor, but he wanted to allow the people to rule themselves with his guiding hand. He said that if I should become king, this is before there was an emperor, that I would like to be done with wars. He was more into education and building infrastructure than anything else. He was a great man, and he would have been a great man. And he was a big fan of Prince Albert. He's how is he? Yeah, his wife is the daughter of Queen Victoria. So the story goes, I can't remember what year it is. It's in the 1880s. William I dies, and he's in his 90s. I can't remember exactly how old, but he lived a very long life. I mean, at 69, he's watching his armies crush the Austrians at the Battle of Königgrätz. And then 4 or 5 years later, he's emperor. He dies. He's in his 90s. That year, it might have been 86. I can't remember, but that is the year of the 3 emperors, because William I dies, and Frederick William, who will be known as Frederick III, becomes emperor of. He becomes emperor or Kaiser of Germany and king of Prussia, because Prussia was still a thing. Prussia was still a kingdom inside of the Empire of Germany. And probably if Friedrich would have lived, we probably would not have had World War I. And if we had not had World War I, we would not have had Hitler, the Holocaust, and World War II, and the Nazis. Friedrich was a great man who believed in peace, and believed in building relationships with other countries, and building education, and building prosperity for all people. He had cancer of the larynx, and he lived for literally 99 days. And when he died, his son, Wilhelm II, ascended to the throne. Wilhelm II was a douchebag. He is the guy who was in charge of Germany at the beginning of World War I, one of the belligerents. He didn't have that peaceful instinct that his father had. He was more like his grandfather, William I. Just probably wasn't as smart as William I was. And William I lived to be 99 years old and ruled Prussia and Germany until he died. William II lived out the rest of his life after World War I in exile, and died at the beginning of World War I. Interesting thing is that the capital of Prussia was Berlin, which is now the capital of Germany, and it was the capital of all the Weimar Republic and the Nazis. I think there were some other capitals temporarily, especially West Germany. But whatever happened to Prussia and the Prussians? Well, most of what was Prussia was East Germany, and the Russians were not very fond of the Prussians. And so when they took over, they took down all the monuments and all the markers of the old Prussian regime, not just of the Nazis and Hitler, but of William I. I don't know if there was a whole lot to Frederick III, but William II, William I. And the Soviets felt like it was Prussian militarism that had brought them all the way up to the Nazis and Hitler. And make no mistakes, the Nazis hated communists. They hated Slavs. They hated the Slavs. They hated Russians. They hated communists just as much as they hated Jews, homosexuals, and gypsies. They committed, just like other places, unbelievable crimes against humanity, against the Russian people. during Operation Barbarossa, where the Nazis invaded Russia. So Russia had a lot of reasons to hate the Nazis, and so they wanted to wipe out all remnants of that old Prussian militarism. And they officially, and I didn't know this until recently, they officially dissolved the Kingdom of Prussia. I think in like 1947 or something like that. So there is no more Prussia. There are areas of Germany that were part of what Prussia was, and Prussia expands and contracts. Prussia, what was once Prussia, is now Poland, different parts of Germany, but there's not like a state of Prussia, like there was a state of Tennessee. There is no entity. There's no political, geographic, nothing. There is no Prussia. Prussia does not exist anymore. There is Germany. There's the Republic of Germany, which is a great place. I'd like to go there someday, and I'm sure that if you go to Berlin, you can see hints of Prussia, Brandenburg, Prussia. At one time it was called, but it no longer exists. So that's it for today. I went an hour and a half. I'm sure no one actually, if you watched all this, thank you very much. Give me a like. Give me I need subscriptions, and leave me a comment. I'd like to read it. And I thank you very much for. Let me see if I can stop. There we go. I thank you very much for sitting in here with me. I'm about to pack up and go to girlfriend's house. I go to girlfriend's house. Go to Laura's house. We're gonna have dinner, and I'll probably have a couple whiskeys, and then tomorrow I'll come home and try to put my life back together. And just so you know where I am with the books, yeah. I'm in the last act of the Prussian Prince. I decided originally I was going to do a really big book that was going to include the Austro-Prussian War and the Franco-Prussian War, and I realized that when I got done, as I'm getting close to finishing part one, it's really just two books. It's two. I think there'll be about 80,000 words a piece, and so instead of trying to push it all together in one big epic book, I decided to break it up into two books. So that, which is great, because it means I get the Prussian Prince out earlier. Because what I wanted to do with that part of the book is a really complete story. So like you would read that, you'd get to the end and be like, wait a minute, there's still like a whole other half of this book. What the hell? So it's going to be two books now. I don't know what the next one's going to be, but the next one's going to focus on the Franco-Prussian War. I already have, some ideas of what's going to happen in the storyline with that. And basically I know what happens. I got to work some things out, but basically what I have left in the book I'm writing now, the Prussian Prince, is we're at the beginning of the Battle of Königgrätz. We're doing the Battle of Königgrätz, and then the aftermath of what happens after that, including Karl's story and wrapping that up and setting up the next book. So in some ways, I feel like it's kind of like going back to Rampage on the River, of writing. When I wrote Rampage on the River, I just wanted to write a simple, straightforward story, and then I wrote a sequel, and then each book got bigger and bigger and bigger. I wanted to get back to writing, to going back that this might be a trilogy. It's at least two books. It might be a trilogy. We'll see. But what I have in mind is maybe I'd like to have the rough draft of this done by the end of the summer, and then be editing in the fall, and then either get it out by the end of the year or the beginning of the following year, then writing the Franco-Prussian book. And then there might be a third book. We'll see how it times out, or that might just be one more book. And then we're going to do Black James. And I'll just say this. Black James, if you read Mexico, My Love, you know who I'm talking about. We're going to give him a whole book. It might be not the next book, the book after that, or the book after that. And then there's more. And just so you know, I'm not going to just write a million books about Karl. I have actually written his death. The scene in which he dies, it's not in this book. It's not in the next or the next one. but there is an end to Carl, and there is a path that he is going to take. And I hope you stick with me through that. But we're gonna explore some of the things we talked about today, because this started off as a Civil War thing, but what we're really doing is we're marching into the 20th century eventually, and into World War One. And I even have an idea for World War II as well. So that's kind of the direction we're going as of right now. Things could change, but that's kind of what the plan is now. Hey, I love you guys. Thank you for joining me. And I hope it wasn't too boring. And stay with me. And, there's a link to my books if you want to read it. Good place to start is Rampage on the River. Or if you want to start with the prequel, you can do that too, but it'll give away some of the some spoilers. If you read Mexico, My Love, and hopefully, whether it comes out at the beginning of this year or at the end of this year or the beginning of next year, most for sure in 2024, you'll be able to read the Prussian Prince, and it's good. I'm really happy with it. I like that I'm expanding beyond just the American Civil War. I never intended to only be an American Civil War writer. It was just my starting point. Now, Simon Schuster says, hey, we're going to give you a bunch of money and we want you to write more Civil War novels. I got some ideas. I mean, I would do it. But for the time being, I don't have any plans to do that unless somebody wants to pay me a lot of money to do so. All right. I love you guys. Take care and have a happy reading. Hey, and do me a favor. Keep reading, even if it's not my book. And whoever's book you are reading, I want you, that's Laura right there, just giving me, she's heading home. I'm going to write her back. Perfect timing. Go on Amazon, go on Goodreads, give your favorite authors a review and give them as many stars as you're willing to do so. And I hope it's 5. Give them a 5-star review, write some nice things about them. There's some jackasses out there. I've been pretty lucky, but I know authors, I've heard horror stories. People get 1-star reviews for stupid, unfair things. Help your authors out. Keep reading. It helps you out. And I'm here to serve you for the rest of my life. All I want to do is make you happy, keep you entertained, and maybe show you a few things that happened in history that I think are interesting. All right.